Okay, today we're going to reinforce exactly how important it is to have the rails on the bar 90 degrees to the side. What happens when a rail is lower than the other is your chain will cock. Now on a regular chainsaw you may not notice it that much, but on a stationary bar coming down on a stationary platform, this bar cannot flex or twist sideways, right, left, like it could on a chainsaw. So what happens is the chain cocks, the bar stops going down. Right away, everybody thinks there's something wrong with the machine, and there's not. The only thing that's wrong is either the bar's out of square or the chain itself is dull. One of the two. And we can usually trace it back to one rail being lower than the other. So what we need to do is just make sure that these rails are 90 degrees to the side. It's very, very important. Just because it's a new bar, don't assume that it's square, that it's 90 degrees. I've had countless bars that were not, believe me. So you put a new bar on, you assume that it's square, and it's not. You're going to be sitting there wondering what's going on. This is basically a new bar. As you can see, the paint is still on it. We're going to take and run it across the surfacing grinder here, and we're going to show you now if this bar is square or not. This is a new bar. It may be, it may not be, but you will see the flaws in it right away when we start to surface it. Okay, so what we're going to do is visually inspect this bar first, and there is a few imperfections in it. Both sides. Let's take a look at this side. Also here. I mean, you can look at it, you can decide at that point if you want to put it on the machine, or maybe you want to just take it on a surfacer and just check it. It would be, I think it would be to your advantage to remove all doubt before you put it on and send it down the road. But that choice is up to you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take this on the surfacer here. We're going to lightly go over it just to see how bad the imperfections are, if there are any at all. So let's start this up and see what we can do. Okay, you can see here we're grinding on this rail, but not completely on this rail. All the way down. This rail seems to have been a little bit higher than the back rail, to me, the back rail. So what I would say here is this bar should actually be surfaced. That way you know it's going to be 90 degrees and you're not going to have issues on the machine with it. So with that, we'll turn the machine back on and finish grinding it. Okay, we've ground it now, lightly surfaced it, and as you can see, we have it all done. They're both the same. We've cleaned it up. This side is ready to go. We just have the other side to do. But I wanted you to see the progress that we made while we were grinding. So now we know that this rail, both sides, is 90 degrees to the side, and we know we should not have any trouble with it at all. Okay. We got the rail ground. Now, If you don't have a grinder such as this, a surfacing grinder for rails and bars, there are aftermarket hand files available, and basically what it is it just has a side that comes down. There's a file in the top, and a place for your hand, and you just go holding it against the side. You just make strokes. It's time consuming, but out in the woods or whatever, it gets the job done, so you can keep working. The other thing, I don't recommend using a file to file it. The only reason we have this here is when we're done grinding the bar, is we're going to strike the side of it to take any little burr off that may be there from running it through here. We're going to take and grind the other side now, a little at a time, so we can actually show the progression on the bar itself. Okay, we're going to take another cut, see how much it's going to take to get this cleaned up. Now, I've been grinding using a nominal pressure on it, and we've been having an issue here getting this square. So I'm just doing this so that you can see a brand new bar is not always square, not 90 degrees. When you're done grinding the bar or squaring the bar, you'll want to take a file and just run over the lip here. All you're doing is taking that burr off that you created from grinding, and believe me, it is sharp, so you will want to do this. And don't take a lot, real lightly. Okay, the other thing you want to make sure and do is on your oil port holes right here, there's another hole. You want to make sure this is clear. There's another hole that goes from the port where the oil comes in up to where the chain picks it up and takes it to the nose. That has to be clear or you're not oiling anything. There's a little hole just that this fits down, and I'm going to stand this up a little bit so maybe we can see it a little better. You got your tip cleaner. I use a tip cleaner from a torch, and I can see it moving in there. You want to make sure that's clean. Also, the rail itself. You can get a tool like this from DYNA or Oregon or whatever. This is made for 404 chain and the 404 bar. This end here is made for keeping the bar groove clean. Drop it down in there and pull. There, we got some stuff out of that already. So, and that would be from grinding. You want to make sure when you're done grinding and everything else that you are cleaning this. Here's another bunch that came out. What happens is, if that trough gets filled up with sawdust to the depth of the drive link on the chain, there's no place for the oil to go. So you want to make sure and keep that clean. Every time you service your bar and chain, You want to keep that clean. So those are a few more important things you want to do. And if you're grinding the bar a lot, here's the depth gauge. That line that's on this bar, or this gauge, shows you the maximum grinding limit that's allowed for that chain to ride in here. So you want to put that in the groove, and if it only went to there, it's time for a new bar. If you can take it in further, you're doing good. That's what you want to do. Okay, so we're out here now and we're putting the chain and the bar back on the machine. I got it pretty much preset. The adjusting peg is right here. I cleaned everything prior to it, so there was no sawdust or anything left behind it. What we want to do is make sure when you put the chain and the bar on, the chain is seated in the sprocket, the drive links are in the sprocket where they belong. When you get everything in pre-tensioned a little bit, not too much, you take your outer plate with the wings to the top, put it on, just like that. You have two 9/16 nuts. I've seen some people put these on with an impact wrench, and that does cause problems. Taking them off with an impact, the cordless impact, is fine, but you don't need to put them on with an impact wrench. That just stresses everything. That stud that's in here, it's just one thing that you don't need to do. And I'm just going to snug these up a little bit so our bar doesn't move. And then we'll get our tensioning wrench. I'm going to have to go on the back side. Okay, now I can come back around the front. We're going to tension this up. Yeah, we're just about there. Now you're going to set the tension on this. It'll be tighter than what you would be on a chainsaw. Just so, I don't know if you can see that, just so you can pull the chain off the rail a little bit, maybe 1/8 of an inch. That's plenty tight. You don't want to get it too tight, but you want it tighter than what you would have on a chainsaw. Then we can finish tightening up our lug nuts here, or bar nuts. And there you have it. Take a second look, make sure everything's in where it's supposed to be. And that's fine. The reason we have this red mark on here is we mark the tooth where we start sharpening, so we know when we're around the chain and it's done. All right, close our guard, and this one is ready to go. What we're going to do here is we're going to sharpen this chain, but there's a few things that are very important in sharpening a chain. Number one, the first thing is we've had people that grind the gullet, this is called the gullet, way down into here, and there's no need to. This part of the chain does nothing except make the tooth stronger. If you grind it away, you're making the tooth weaker. Right here, the only part of the tooth that does any work at all, as far as cutting, is the distance from the top of the shearing edge to the top of the raker. That distance from there to here is all that does any work. The rest of this is just along for the ride. And by grinding down in here, you're weakening the tooth. You want a nice profile to it, but it's just along for the ride. So when you're grinding, first you sharpen the tooth, then you measure from here, you go down on this particular type of chain is 50 thousandths. So you can set your gauge and file it. If you're filing by hand, you can get a 45 thousandths gauge or a 40 thousandths or a 50 thousandths, preferably with a hand file that's made for that, or a flat raker file. You can file your raker down. It only takes a couple swipes. It's a very simple, easy thing to do, and it's something that you really need to do. We've had also reports of guys saying, well, they cut just fine, and we go about halfway down the tooth, the chain, before we even check the rakers. Well, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But this chain is designed to cut at its peak performance with a 50 thousandths raker. And what's happening is, if you let it get less than that, which 45 thousandths is still okay, but you start getting less than that, and all of a sudden it's taking you longer to cut, because instead of a 1/8 inch thick ribbon of chips that it's supposed to be making, now you're only making a 1/16 thick ribbon of chips. So that tells you right there, your production has been cut in half, whether you realize it or not. This chain is designed to be utilized at 50 thousandths raker. The only reason for not doing a raker like that, well, number one is the guy's too lazy to do it. Don't want to take the time to do it. You think you got to hurry up and get back out there. Well, if you hurry up, get back out there and don't do the rakers, all you're doing is hurrying up, getting back out there, and producing half of what you could be producing. And that's really the bottom line on it. That raker is the governor of the tooth. Just like the pitch on an outboard motor on the prop, that's the governor of the motor. This is the governor of a chain. So it's designed to run at 50 thousandths. That's where it should be maintained. You can go 2 or 3 sharpenings possibly and then check it. That's fine, but not half the tooth. You've been wasting your time for a long time. Okay, now we're going to start on the other side. We're going to bring it back. We just want to make sure everything's set up right. Now, I paint the teeth, or the tooth, so when I come back, I can make sure I'm grinding and I've taken all the paint off on the tooth. That tells me that I have a sharp chain. It's exactly where it should be. So I can continue going around the chain and finish sharpening it where everything will be just what it should be. We'll soak it in oil overnight, hang it up to dry or drip all the excess oil off, and then it'll be ready to be installed on the machine. What we're going to do now is set up the machine so we can do the rakers. Like I said earlier, rakers are very, very important to the cutting and actually how your machine performs. So we're bringing the shearing edge of the tooth under the stone. We want to go from the shearing edge, just so we're touching it, just ever so lightly, right there. We're going to back that out, bring our stop in, make sure we have our raker underneath the center of the stone, and which I do, and then we're going to go, every notch up here is 5 thousandths. We're going to go 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. We're going 45, the chain says 50. I go 45 only to allow for any variance that we might be taking too much off. So with that, we'll start our grinder and I'll show you what we're going to be doing here. Okay, that one obviously wasn't taken off too much. Okay, now you're going to go around the chain doing both sides, or on a reversible unit you would change and turn your wheel the opposite way. Always going into the tooth. So with that, that's using the machine. You can do this with your Oregon grinder, your Tecumseh grinder. You stand it up, set your depth on the machine, and run on a Tecumseh, you actually pull the head down. So with that said, I want to show you how to do it by hand also. If you don't have the fancy grinder or a Raker grinder or whatever, really all you need is you need a Raker file. A Raker file has teeth on the flat, both sides, but not on the edge. There's no file on the edge. Reason for that is when you're doing it, after you get done sharpening the chain, you don't want to have to file the point off your tooth. It just doesn't make good sense. So, that's what's called a Raker file. Then you need a depth gauge. These come in different depths, from 25 thousandths down to 50 or even further. So you need one of these, and you can see the step in it. That's where you're going to be filing. You're going to lay this over the top of the cutting tooth so that the Raker comes up in this slot. You push down and hold it flat, then you go over the top of it. Don't worry, you're not gonna file that Raker gauge, and you can tell because all of a sudden it'll get real easy to do. Pull the chain back, do another one, and this is all that's to it, doing your Rakers. It's very simple. This part protects the tooth. The raker shows up inside, you're pushing down on it, and you got it done. The other reason for doing your rakers the way they should be, if you take too much off, this condition, the heel wearing on the tooth and even the front part is going to be enhanced. And that's what's wearing your rail and the chain link out, the sides of the chain. So you have to be real careful as far as how much of the raker you take off. That's why they spec out 50 thousandths. On the tooth itself, you can see here, you can see a burr, and you can see how much this is worn, and that's what's happening. By not taking enough off, you actually load the front, as you can see here. Because now the whole thing is you're putting more weight on here, because you got to remember on this bar and this chain, there's hydraulic pressure that pushes down to a point on that wood. So by not having this set the way it's supposed to be, you're just causing premature wear either on the heel, the front, or both, which in turn wears the rails of the bar. So you need to do this the proper way.